Thank you. When I die, and once Suzanne has disposed of me in an environmentally friendly way, I think the epitaph on my gravestone will be accidental do-gooder. I didn't start out with charitable intentions. I'm no different to anyone here. But what happened to me 14 years ago was I accidentally lit a blue touch paper of enthusiasm and innovation that has carried on for the last 14 years. I was working in an accountancy firm at the time. I'd had a 9-year military career in the Royal Navy, surrounded by leadership, motivation, competition. We came into an office environment where sadly it was lacking, so we organised a game of football, and that was all it was ever meant to be, just one-off corporate football match. 3 of us put the email out, and within 3 or 4 weeks we had 160 people wanting to take part, 16 teams, which was great. We had some sponsorship money. We didn't need it. We got everything for free at the end of the day. And after the football had finished, we picked 3 charities out of the phone book, and we gave about £1,500 to 3 different charities. 6 months later, the good idea came back to haunt us. The corporates wanted to get involved again. The charities wanted to get involved. They liked what we had done for them. And we had stumbled across this kind of pre-CSR concept of linking charities with corporates. Disability charities, deaf children's charities wanted to get involved, and they wanted to be able to play sport on a level playing field with able-bodied sportsmen. They'd never, in 16 years of disability sport in Jersey at the time, they'd never been asked to do that. So we kind of stumbled upon this concept where people were proud about their brand. People were proud to fly their corporate flag and take part in a football match, which was essentially aimed at fat bankers. It wasn't anything more than that at the time. So we carried on, and by 2004, we'd added a ladies' event, and we'd added a golfing challenge with the same concept. So we got disabled players to play alongside able-bodied corporate executives, unlike your standard corporate golf day. 2006, we undertook probably the biggest challenge of our time so far. We organised a sailing challenge where we chartered a fleet of 15 identical yachts from the south of England, and we bucked the advice of all the yacht clubs and everybody else, and we took a whole load of novices and a whole load of disabled and deaf adults and deaf children, and we sailed them across the English Channel overnight, 5-day challenge, matched fleet racing, and everybody had the most amazing time. The novices got more out of it than anybody else. So we started to build this whole concept. We started to innovate with more charities. We entwined the charities with what we were doing. It wasn't just about raising money for the charities, because despite popular conception, it's not just about the money. They like the checks, but at the end of the day, they'd rather be taking part in what we were doing, showcasing their abilities rather than their disabilities. So through the sailing challenge, we met a guy, Jeff Holt, who tragically, when he was 18 years old, broke his neck in a swimming accident. Ever since, he's been campaigning for disability water sports, water access, very well-known yachtsman in the UK. He's quadriplegic, confined to a wheelchair, limited use of his upper limbs. He just invented a concept and designed a concept called Wetwheels. Some of you may have heard of the Wetwheels idea now. And that was our second blue touch paper. Jeff came over for the May 2012 boat show, and we took 90 local disabled, disadvantaged, and young people out to the sea. The reaction was so strong. Wheelchair, 78-year-old wheelchair user, MS sufferer, who'd been in an old folks home for 5 years, never thought she'd get back out to sea again. 7-year-old cancer sufferer, her single mum, Down syndrome, learning difficulties, autistic, the whole spectrum, deprived kids, all the rest of it. We took them to sea, and they had the most amazing time, whether it was to spot a dolphin, to catch a fish, or really just to get the wind and the salt in their hair. So we decided over a coffee, which is where most of these things start, that Jersey would be best served by having a Wetwheels jersey for itself. So we set about with a fundraising challenge to replicate what Jeff had done with his Wetwheels and bring that concept to Jersey. Now, the idea was that it wasn't just going to benefit one charity. It was going to benefit every single community group in the island. We set ourselves a 2-year fundraising target for the £160,000. We actually hit that target within 6 weeks. We had 4 pledges for a total of 160,000. So we got to 90,000 by December 2012, about 4 weeks after we started the fundraising. We flew to the Isle of Wight, and we ordered the boat. She arrived in August last year, and she's just entered service. And this year, we're hoping to take out over 1,000 wheelchair, disabled, disadvantaged passengers in the island. Through my work, I'm no different to you guys. Through my work, I think that all that's happened to me is that I've been hit by this kind of infection of inspiration and motivation. Everybody around me inspires me and motivates me, whether it's a famous footballer that we bring over, whether it's a quadriplegic yachtsman, or whether it's a kid in Guatemala who's making a life out of, from poverty into education. And I think that that's inherent in everybody. Everybody has that ability to be infected by innovation and inspiration. But in the society we live in, I think that it's suppressed. I think that Jeremy's talk about leadership and how we've kind of merged that and confused that with management and day-to-day roles and the fear of getting things wrong, the fear of failure, is stifling innovation and the ability to inspire. I also spent some time as a governor of a local fee-paying college. I spent 4.5 years where I was asked to come on board to the Board of Governors and act in a fundraising stroke developmental strategic way. The board was 15 strong and the average age was probably about 65. Nearly every governor had served more than his 9-year term, and I was a bit surprised. My boys were at the school. I'd been to the school with my brother. My 2 nephews were at the same school, and I was a bit surprised that there was no strategy, no business plan, no communication with parents, prospective parents, or anything that I would have thought with a business of a £4 to £5 million turnover would actually need. We spent 2 years designing a foundation that was going to get everybody in the same alignment to make a difference to the college. We had 800, within 6 weeks, we had 800 supporters, parents, former pupils, teachers, corporates, the whole lot. Internal politics, and dare I say it, fear of the head teacher and the deputy head teacher actually crushed the whole thing back into its box before my very eyes. It was a failure. It was a failure because there was no leadership with the governors. The Board of Governors was impotent. There was no terms of reference for anybody to benchmark against how they should act. And it was a real defining moment because, to me, we were failing the children of the school, and we were failing the school as a whole. So when it comes to CSR, now I've looked at CSR. My work, I was the finance director in the finance industry for 7 years. So I've had my hands on the purse strings. I've tried to understand where we should be spending our money and how we should be spending it. Now, to me, CSR is about how businesses structure and operate internally to leverage and benefit their wider community in which they operate. That's the kind of standard definition. But in Jersey, we live in this very small microclimate where traditional CSR doesn't really come into effect. From my experience and all the corporate sport we've done and all the talking to charities and the talking to corporates, what we have in Jersey is a very naive way of trying to support our community. Now, I don't mean that in a bad way, I just mean it in an observational way. Because I believe that education, I believe that charities, which are the 2 prime targets for CSR initiatives, are also very much to blame about why things just don't work at the moment. So you've heard about the education side. You've heard about where I think the failure of this particular college, and hopefully it's acting in isolation. But we just failed to inspire our kids. I did a careers day yesterday. I spent the day at Bowlier School, lovely school, 500 girls. And we talked about voluntary work, and we talked about charity, and we talked about how we inspire and motivate. Around me were corporates who I would have thought were at a careers day to actually inspire and motivate our kids. I didn't see any of it all day. I just saw kids walking past corporates who were there because they had to be there, a couple of pop-up banners, a couple of leaflets, everything else. And I could not see one inspired child in the whole room out of about 400. And that really disappointed me as well. And I point this back to CSR because, to me, CSR from a business should be looking to help where it matters most. But traditionally, and I know this because I speak to many corporates, traditionally CSR is an initiative that's given by the board historically to the marketing department. And I can never understand why the marketing department get to manage something which they have no experience doing. They get given a lump sum of money, they get given a couple of ideas, and it's up to them to drive this CSR strategy home. And in my experience, nod if you agree with me, but in my experience, the charities just don't benefit. The issues that beset the marketing departments are issues like everyone's too busy. Nobody's monitoring and feeding back the CSR initiatives. They're too short term. So when you talk to charities, 1 year of CSR benefit is not helping anybody. I've had it with my charities where we've had a long-term 3-year deal with a local bank. Nothing has ever happened. The promises that we were promised and the expansion techniques and the strategies and the corporate assistance just didn't happen. And it left us in a worse place than when we actually started. And I really think that's a big, big issue with CSR. Staff are not motivated. I don't know if any of you would disagree with me here, but staff are just not motivated by CSR. We went to a corporate back when Le Tournois, the first charity we started, was very young. It was an accounting firm, about 80 staff, and they ran an internal CSR initiative where if a staff member invested 30 hours of his own time, the company would give him 30 hours of company time plus £500 to the charity of the choice. Now, when I asked at the end of the year just how many people had taken advantage of that, the answer was 2. 2 people out of the whole business have been motivated and stimulated enough to give 30 hours of their time to get another 30 hours. That's 250 working days and about £40,000 that went down the drain. Not because they didn't want to do it, it was because the staff just didn't know where to start. Charities don't help themselves either. I'm quite a cynic. I'm quite a frustrated do-gooder as well. So maybe that's another thing to add to my epitaph. Jersey is one of the only and one of the final Western jurisdictions that doesn't have a charities law. This is going to change later in the year, but for years it's just been governed by an organisation called the Association of Jersey Charities. Now, membership is optional. You don't have to be a member. And if you are a member, you don't have to do anything different. It's just a name in a book, effectively. There's no compliance, there's no requirement to publish your statutory accounts, and there's no requirement to actually publish your strategy. So how can corporates go to a charity and ask them for an open book account? How do they know where their money is going to be spent in the right direction? They just don't. And I've seen this before. I've seen it with my own charity where a cheque will come through the post and there's just nothing else for it. And I think that's wrong. And I think that the new charities law that's coming in later this year is going to really shake up the landscape over here. And I think mainly for the better. It's going to introduce a charities test, which I think is going to actually reduce the number of charities. About 300 members of the association at the moment. And I think that's going to drop significantly when charities realise that they're just not cut out for this new governance. They're publishing their accounts, publishing the strategy of their fundraising, publishing the strategy of where they're going to be spending their money. I know 2 charities over here that I've been working with as well. They've got reserves in excess of £1 million. One has £1.4 million. They have 40 members, and they haven't spent any money effectively for the last 2 or 3 years. Yet they're still fundraising, and they're still getting people and corporates to actually give money to them. And they're just building reserves for no particular benefit. And to me, I think that's wrong because it's taking money away from other charities that need it more and have a clear policy for spending it. The other thing about CSR, as I said before, is that I don't see staff motivated. I really don't. By having a CSR initiative that's run by a marketing department is fundamentally sort of counterintuitive to actually motivating staff. Staff look upon marketing departments with a bit of cynicism. If you're a fee earner, marketing department is an excess. It's a worry for somebody else. It's something that they don't really get involved with. It's lining their work up. It's filling their working day with fee-paying work. They don't have time to do anything else. So to give the marketing department really puts off a lot of the staff members. Now, within your staff, if you have maybe a staff head count of about 50 people, I reckon on an average, you'd have about 10 proactive staff in the community. They're all doing their own thing. They've all got their own interests. Now, to try and energize the whole business into doing CSR and to doing some good within the community, to try and motivate those 10 to do more work and to try and steer them into a CSR initiative and then to try and motivate the other 40 is not impossible. And everything is failing. Everything is failing in terms of the impact that it's having on education and the impact on the wider community. So how do we change this? The answer is I don't know. The answer is that we need to think again about how we lead. We need to think again how we actually run and structure our businesses. And Jeremy was talking before about the art of leadership, the art of making decisions, and the art of being able to inspire the people that work for you. It doesn't take much. I don't think that takes much. If you can just start this ripple effect, if you can just start the ripple where you motivate and inspire one person, they will then go out and inspire another 3 or 4 people. And like we did with Le Tournois, and like what happened with TEDx just a couple of years ago, you start with one nugget of an idea, and then big things can happen. Everything I do and all the charity work that I do, I now see through the eyes of my kids. I've got 2 kids, and my oldest was 5 months old when we started the first Le Tournoi event. And everything I do is seen through his eyes. I get really quite conscious about that because he has a paranoid dad who's absolutely obsessed by inspiration, leadership, and all this charity work that goes on in the house. But everything that he looks at, he sees motivation. He sees issues that maybe not everybody sees in the world. Now, he's 14 now. Now, he came to me. We do some work in Guatemala. We sponsor some children in another charity in Guatemala where we organize a volcano challenge. We take people out. We climb 3 active volcanoes in 3 days, and we raise money for some kids in a town in Guatemala to take them out of poverty and slums into education. I've been out a couple of times. My kids are so obsessed by the poverty and the abuse and all the stories that I come back with that my eldest, who's now 14, asked if he can come out in the summer with me to go and live in the slums. Now, I don't think he realised at the time that there wouldn't be any PlayStations or Facebook accounts or anything else, but he's up for it. And he actually set for himself, he set a £1,000 fundraising target as well. So he's now going out and he's motivating and starting his own ripple effect within our own children of 14 years old to go to his friends and actually get his friends to be motivated and inspired enough by what he's doing, climbing an active volcano, to go and raise £1,000 for the children. So it's how we as business leaders and we as social leaders, how can we just start those blue touch papers going? The next talk is going to be really inspiring about that, and it's a great way, I think, to finish the day and to answer my question. But it doesn't take much. Every one of you in here has the ability. Every one of you has the knowledge and the understanding to actually go out and make that difference. But I don't want you to go out and make that difference just by looking in silos. Don't go out to one charity. Don't go out to one school, because that doesn't work. In Jersey, that doesn't work. Go out and look how we can work holistically. Take a step back. Why do businesses work in isolation? Why do they have one charity for one corporate? It doesn't work. You don't leverage the benefit by having one charity for one corporate. Corporates should be standing back. They should be identifying their leaders. They should be talent managing their leaders, not just to be good managers within their own workforce, but actually when they get out into the wider world, to go and inspire and join up with other business leaders and actually make a difference to all charities. The good thing about Wetwheels, the boat that I was talking about earlier, is that there is no barriers to using it. It's not just designed for one specific cause or one specific charity. We stood back and we said, what can we do that will benefit every single person in the island? And Wetwheels was an obvious solution where in 5-6 weeks we had £160,000 in a recession almost thrown at us, because that was the kind of appetite people have for looking holistically. What else can we do? I think businesses need to get more involved in education. I don't think that at the moment, I think the education system is far too rigid, it's far too tight. The closed shop of the college that I was a governor at is a great example of where there was a resistance to actually getting people in who maybe knew better than the school to make the change and to inspire and motivate the children. But I think businesses need to look at that as well. And I think that we need to start looking at how we motivate our children. Personally, I don't understand why we wait till 17 or 18 years old to take our kids to university, to have a look around, to see what a university smells like, what it feels like, what it looks like. Kids need to be motivated earlier these days. And I don't see the issue with taking kids 12, 13 years old and showing them around a university and inspiring and motivating so they know when they go through their path of GCSEs and A-levels, they know they want to go. They're not just being forced down a route that their parents or their teachers or whatever, because that's not good for industry either. You know, we need to welcome kids back to the island who are motivated, who have done a very tailored further education, and when they come back to the island, they want to work. They're hungry to work. Now, the education side, I don't think, is all bad news. In the last 10 years in Jersey, the number of school leavers who actually go on to obtain a higher education degree has risen from 14% to 34%, which is quite incredible. And at the same time, the number of school leavers who are leaving without any formal qualifications has dropped from 34% to 20%. So I think that something must be working. But that doesn't line kids up. That gives them an exam. That gives them something to hold on to, but it doesn't prepare them for life. It doesn't prepare them in a personal development way that when they come to see us as employers, they're ready to hit the ground running and join our organisations. And that's where I think the corporate responsibility comes in. It's not about giving money to charity in Jersey. It's not about the 1 to 2 year initiatives where corporates have a nice marketing team, they give some tennis rackets to kids who already have tennis rackets, and they take a nice photograph and they stick it in their corporate accounts the year later, and they move away and they go on to something else. I heard the other day that I do a lot of work with the community sport development guys over here. It's a very small team that is charged with looking and auditing and managing primary school sport to try and break down this whole sort of cycle of obesity and antisocial behaviour that Jersey suffers from. And I was shocked to hear that the guys estimated there's probably 150 primary school kids over here who don't have a pair of training shoes. There's people over here that haven't been to the beach. They're 15 years old. They haven't been to the beach. And these are the kind of issues. How can we develop our kids and how can we make them into these worldly people if corporates don't actually get involved and target their leaders, target their staff, and target where they're delivering their funds into where it really counts, and that is at the grassroots. It's not halfway up the scale. It's not the rugby club academy, in my view. It's not the tennis academies, so we get a nice silver line photograph. We need to start right at the very bottom because it's a growing issue over here. Antisocial behaviour is still a very grave issue. And I feel quite strongly as well. I live in a middle-class bubble, as do most of you, I would imagine here. You know, my kids go to private school, they go to private football lessons, we go to restaurants, we go to the beach. Through the tunnel and all around the island, there are social issues that still shock me. You know, I've been living here all my life, and they still shock me. And I can't understand why the corporate initiatives, the CSR strategies and everything else don't start right at the bottom, because unless you sort the bottom issues out, you'll never sort the middle issues out. So just to conclude, I just think that everybody has a part to play. We can all be motivated, we can all be inspired. It just happened to me. You know, I've become addicted to being around inspirational people. Whether it's a professional footballer, whether it's a guy in a wheelchair or whatever, it doesn't matter. What we need to do is we need to inspire the next generation of our leaders. We need to step back from relying on government. How can we rely on government to do anything else? They had one attempt at a referendum, they botched it, and the next by-election we had the lowest voter turnout in Western history, 10%. You know, so how do we have no confidence in our government to actually make a change? And what I want to do is try and inspire people and motivate people to actually take a step back and then work out how we can make things different for ourselves. Because if we don't make a difference, starting in this room, which is, we're all here for innovation and for motivation. If we can't start to make that change, then I don't know who can. So thank you very much for your time.